Welcome to the world united. Welcome to the world united.
KAMAU Abayomi is a mystical artist, curator, soulful guidance counselor. He is an interdisciplinary artist, mystical arts curator, and spiritual guide. KAMAU shares from 25 years of integrated experiential wisdom rooted in law of one principle. It's the ancient Kemetic, the Egyptian cosmology, and Taoistic philosophy. He's a graduate of the Gateway Voyage Consciousness Studies program at the world renowned Monroe Institute, and it is certified White Tiger Qigong instructor. KAMAU has received the Harvard University certification in the study of scriptural Buddhism. For the last 10 years, he's been the director of Live Mysteries Art Curations. KAMAU is also an award-winning choreographer, a 2x international poetry slam champion, author of a novel and book of poetry, and is an internationally touring DJ and recording artist. KAMAU, we are so excited to listen to you, and your topic is the art of living poetry. Over to you.
Yes, peace. Thank you all. Thank you for having me. Thank you for the invite. Thank you for the previous speakers for sharing your wisdom, your knowledge. And I'm going to speak a little bit about living poetry as opposed to writing poetry. Most people will often want to know, how do I write poetry? And I've done many poetry workshops as well about how to write poetry. But I always start in those workshops by telling people, you know, the best way to write poetry is to live poetry. Poetry comes from life, not the other way around. Life doesn't necessarily, you don't write poetry without experiencing life. And so to exemplify this, I want to just take a couple of moments to share two short stories, and then I'll speak a little bit more about living poetry. So about 6 years ago now, we're going into 2021, so 6 years ago now, I had an experience where I woke up really, really early in the morning, about 5 in the morning, and I felt a series of what felt like attacks on my spiritual body, not necessarily my physical body, but energetically being attacked. And interestingly enough, that day I had went and bought some crystals. I just got the hit to go buy some crystals. So I went, I got some quartz crystals, some amethyst, some obsidian, some jade. I got all these different crystals. And I went to sleep with them all in my bed, which was funny. And so around 5 in the morning, I started feeling like, oh, this energy is coming in. And immediately I just started grabbing my crystals and placing them over my chakra points. When I did that, the energy began to subside. And once this feeling of attack was done, I got a clear whisper to go to the ocean. Right? So I was like, okay, at that time, I had moved about 5 minutes away from the ocean. Interestingly enough, a month prior to that, I just got the hit to leave where I had been living for the previous 2 years and go get closer to the ocean. And so I heeded the whisper. I got up, I put on some clothes, some light clothes, and then I went to the beach and I started to go into the water. Now, that was the first time in years, and I mean years, 3 decades that I had gone into the ocean, because I had some serious trauma as a young person. And when I was about 10 years old, where I almost drowned in a river and I almost drowned in a pool. Currently, I live on an island in Bali, Indonesia, which of course is surrounded by water, but I had never gone into the ocean. I would never go into the pools, no rivers. Friends would be like, oh, I'm going swimming, I'm going surfing. I'd be like, see you later. Anyhow, in this particular instance, the hit was to go into the water. And so I had to heed that. And so I slowly went out into the water and got that energy over my being. When I went back onto the beach, I began to practice some Qigong. The Qigong that I had been studying Qigong for a couple of years now, on and off, inconsistently. But I would practice what I could remember. I would practice, and then the energy would stabilize. And then from that point on, every single day I would go to the beach and begin to practice Qigong and slowly get more comfortable with being in the water. After about maybe 5 or 6 months of this, I had finished the Qigong session. I was in the water at the beginning, and I had a show that night. That's right. I had a show that night of poetry. And so I was just going through my mind, okay, what piece do I want to do? What poetry do I want to perform for this particular evening? And so found out what I wanted to do. Then I started reciting it to the ocean and giving it the energy, as if I was in front of an audience, but the ocean was my audience. And so I recite this poem. Did that, everything fine, completed my little time on the beach, and then went about my day. Later on in that evening, it was time for me to present my poetry. Took the mic, and I said the first few lines of this particular poem. And the poem starts, "From the chalice of constant change, I sip bittersweet sensations of solitude. Drunk with introspection, my stagger is more balanced than it's ever been. As the path I travel vibrates at a rate that it makes it appear that I'm walking on water." Soon as I completed that line, "makes it appear that I'm walking on water," I felt just a wave of energy just totally engulf my being, fully vibrational. Like I literally, as I continued my poem, I like lifted my hands and looked at my hands like, what the hell is going on here? It was such a powerful energy that was overcoming. Continued through my piece. Fine. I was sounding, and I perform this piece a lot of times so I can like do it as well as let my mind think about other things as I'm doing this. It's just a little thing I can do. And so this energy was just so strong over me. After I concluded that particular poem, I never received a response that I had, prior to doing it this time. And again, I've done this poem many times, but nobody has had this response. Nobody gave me this particular response. Afterwards, had like a 30-minute kind of conversation with a group of about 6 people in the corner of a party. Like there's music, people dancing all around. And we're in this corner having this conversation that was rooted in the poem, which was about personal reflection, personal affirmation, energizing, really, really tapping into the fact that we are connected with everything, every aspect of life. There is no separation. That's the root of this particular poem. And it's okay to spend time in solitude in order to access that. And so I was in this corner with these 6 other individuals having this conversation while this full-on party is going on. And I reflected back on being on the beach. And I was like, the connection between the sound vibration with the vibrations that are coming from the natural environment, the ocean, the wind, the trees that were behind me, the birds that were coming through. Later on the beach, the plethora of dragonflies that were there, all this connected, it charged and energized the very words that I was speaking to my audience of nature. And so when it was time for me to share this in a different context, all that energy that was gathered in the moment of being on the beach was now reflected right there in the poem. And it translated out to those who were listening to it. And it unlocked a whole nother level of awareness and the power of how our poetry connects directly with what we are living and what we are going through our experiences in our day-to-day life. So there's no separation between what gets written and what gets lived, and then what gets written. Okay. One more story. I had a DJ gig in Hong Kong one time, and it went well. It was a small gig, but it went very well. And so the promoter of the particular gig was like, "Come back, let's do it again." I'm like, "Sure, let's do it." A few months go down the line, and then I see online that there's a ticket price to go to Hong Kong that was super cheap, and I was like, "Ooh." And I was going to Japan, but I was like, I can go to Hong Kong and then go to Japan. And so I hit up the promoter and was like, "Hey, I'm going to come to Hong Kong. I'm going to book a ticket now. Let's do the gig." She's like, "All right, let's do it." So book the ticket. Cool. Set it up. A couple months go by, getting closer to the time to go. And I send a message to the promoter, say, "Hey, what's going on? I want to just check in with the venue. Everything is okay." She's like, "Oh, I haven't got a venue yet, but I'm on it. I'm going to find something. I'm going to have a meeting. I'm going to find something," so on and so forth. Cool. A couple weeks go by before it's time to fly to the double check-in. The promoter sends me a video of the venue, say, okay, we're going to do it here, so on and so forth. And yeah, it's all set. Let's go. Great. A week prior to going to Hong Kong, I'm online, I'm on Facebook, and a post comes by of a friend of mine who is a model. She's an African model who lives in Japan. And she's modeling these kimonos that are made with African prints. So the designers, it was a collaborative project between a Cameroonian fashion designer and a Japanese fashion designer. And they made these kimonos with African prints. And my friend Abby, she was one of the models in this. So I shared this post. I was like, oh, this is nice. And I have a very deep love for Japan and African culture, of course, obviously. And so, cool, posted that, right? And just went about my way. A week later, fly into Hong Kong. Get to Hong Kong, and I hit up the promoter like, hey, I'm here, I've arrived, so when should we meet just to have a chat? And the promoter replies to me like, oh my God, I didn't tell you, I didn't get the venue. We didn't secure the venue. I'm like, what? She's like, yeah, I'm sorry. I've been so busy with blah, 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 that she didn't tell me that they never got the gig, even though before she said they was going to get it, but it never got confirmed. But she's like, come in and let's talk in person and meet. And so in my head, I'm just like, really? Like how could you be so neglectful to do something like this? Anyhow, so go to meet her, and I'm with my friend who I'm staying with in Hong Kong. I go to meet her. On her desk is just a whole pile of papers, like everywhere, just piles of papers. So immediately it struck me, like obviously she was so swamped in whatever's going on in her life, she totally neglected for, what was going on with our arrangement. So she's talking and she's like, I can only talk a few minutes. She's super rushed. And so as I'm observing this, I'm also noticing myself, like, I'm not angry. Like somewhere deep inside me, I kind of felt something was not in alignment. And so she's talking and she's, I'm sorry, but maybe we can do this, blah, 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 blah. Anyhow, that moment goes, and just in my mind, okay, I'm like, okay, well, what else is at play here? And so my friend, she's like, well, why don't we go down to a spot that's down the street and see if you can DJ there? Okay, let's go. So we walk down the street and we go into this particular small boutique. And I noticed on the walls of these different cool little clothings that are, contemporary clothes, but African style prints on it. And so the woman comes up, who's French, and speaks to my friend, and she's like, hey, what's going on? Welcome, glad you came. And she gives her a poster that there's an African arts festival that's happening in Hong Kong that week. 25 different artists being showcased in 24 different galleries around Hong Kong. I'm like, oh, that's what's up. Cool. So they speak about the possibility of me DJing in the boutique. Said, okay, she's going to talk to a partner and so on and so forth. And we go about our way. We take one of the maps that has the keys to the different galleries we can go check out. So, okay, we start walking towards the closest gallery. We walk up, we get to the streets across the street, and this one brother is walking up towards us, African brother. We get close, meet, say hello, how you doing? African people, when we travel, we like to, acknowledge each other and say hello. And so we spoke, and this is the partner of the French woman. They both founded this festival. So like, oh, cool. Where are you going is what he asked. I said, we're going to go check out this gallery right down the way. And so he's like, oh, we got to hold up because it's closed at the moment, about to go to lunch. And as he's saying this, another African brother is walking towards us. We meet on that corner right there, do introductions. He says, what are you guys doing? I said, we were going to go to this gallery, but now we can. He's like, oh, I'm the person showcasing in this gallery down here. I was like, oh, really? He's like, what do you have? What are you presenting? He's like, oh, I'm a designer, and I did a collaboration with this Japanese designer, and I make African printed kimonos. And I'm like, wait a minute, do you know Abby? He's like, yeah, that's a friend of mine. She was one of the models. I'm like, oh my goodness, I just posted about you a week ago in Bali, this article, and here I am now in Hong Kong with the very designer I had just posted about. The synchronicity was astounding. So I say this to say, and to close it out, and I'll ask a question. What would have happened if I didn't heed the poetry of the moment when that woman was like, oh, there's no gig. Even though you came all this way, you spent your own money, you're spending your money on your food, you're doing your thing, and there's no gig. Now, what if I blew up? What would have happened? All right, I blow up. You this, get angry, start shouting at her. Maybe a cop comes over, knocks you on the head. I have a horrible experience in Hong Kong. But instead, heeding the poetry of the moment, I go down to another section to see what the mystery wants to reveal. What does life want to present? And end up meeting the very designer who I was just talking about in Bali, who I was so, elated to see do this collaborative project. From there, went and had lunch with him, got to know him, went to the different gallery presentations and had a wonderful, wonderful time. So I say this to say, life is poetry. The only difference between a poet and your average person is the perception and awareness that life is poetry. It's the awareness that life in every single moment contains poetry. This whole seminar, these 5 days of, and even before that, going back to the initial world seminars, all through Asia, through Europe, through America, through South America and Africa, all these experiences of people coming together is poetry in and of itself. Now, the degrees in which we can look into that depth and see the beauty in this collaboration, see the beauty in the moment of coming together for the promotion of principles of unity, to the degree that we can do that and relate that to all these different aspects of life, relating it to, the animals that come together to drink at a river, relating it to the way the wind blows and the trees fall down to the ground and those dead leaves become the fuel for new life to birth itself. To see the poetry in every single moment is only about being aware of it, period. So living that is to get into the practices of meditation, of qigong, of yoga, whatever your practices are, to expand your awareness of what is already present in the here and now. Peace. Thank you all for listening.
Thank you so much for this beautiful wisdom. In this entire circle of life, there is so much poetry. Do we have the eyes to see it? Do we have the awareness to experience it? So, such a beautiful message. Thank you so much. A small token of our appreciation. That's for you. The World Parliament on Spirituality 3, the World United Presence, Certificate of Appreciation to KAMAU ABAYOMI for being an esteemed presenter in the 3rd edition of the World Parliament on Spirituality 2020, for teaching us about poetry of life. There is so much poetry in life. Thank you, KAMAU. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. And thank you all for doing this. And I know it's a lot of work to coordinate, so many people on 7 continents, and to do it with peace and with love, and to stay in that space regardless of what the planets are doing, regardless of what's happening with political situations and in the global dynamics and disease and all that stuff. You still are able to come together and present something that is holistically beneficial to people who tune in. And for that, you deserve a certificate. All of you deserve certificates. Everyone who has participated deserves certificates to and regardless of whether we have the paper or not, in the greater aspect of life, we're all receiving those certificates.
Yes. Thank you so much, KAMAU. Thanks for the kind words. The intention is simple: unifying consciousness, one world, one planet, and raising the consciousness for this planet and for all of us, making our lives much, much peaceful and happier and healthier. So that is our intention. Thank you for being an amazing speaker. Thanks for sharing beautiful insights. Gratitude.
Thank you.